There's two different ways to include buildings in your context model. One is within QGIS, and the other one is downloading OBJ files of the buildings. The advantages of the first option within QGIS is that you have a little bit more control about how the buildings look, and the geometry is something you can work with in Rhino. The downloaded ones, they have the correct roof shapes and they look very nice. If you want to work with them in Rhino and not just use them as a background, for example, then you have to redraw the geometry. At first, I'll walk you through the first option within QGIS. We'll use the data from 3D BAG, so 3D BAG. Go to the download section, and here you have this link for WFS. Just copy this one. And then within QGIS, you have this WFS option here as well. And if you right click it and say new connection, and then paste your URL and give it a name and select OK. Then we have this connection to the server of the 3D BAG. And there's 3 different level of detail options. So a very rough one, a medium rough one, and a fine one. And it depends on the project which one makes most sense. You can look at them by selecting one, right-clicking, and choosing Add Layer to Project. So for the medium one, you can see that some larger buildings are split up in several volumes. And I think for our model, for our sample model, this is the best level of detail. For only filtering out the buildings that are within our project boundary, we'll do the same thing again as we did with the bike paths. With the layer selected here, we'll go to Vector, Geoprocessing Tools, and Clip. And for the input layer, we use the LOD 1.3. And for the overlay layer, our project boundary. And then for this one, we actually have to change one setting in the advanced settings here. The invalid feature filtering, you have to change it to skip and then run. And now we only have the buildings within our project boundary, so we can turn off the other layer. And what we'll do now is we'll compute the building heights. If you right click on our new layer and open the attribute table, you can see all the data points that our surfaces contain. And you can see that there's a few different heights. So H duck min is the minimum height of the roof. Then you have a 50% mark, a 70% mark, and a maximum value. So if you think about the library, for example, the highest point of the cone would be this value, the max value. And then the lowest point of the roof would be the minimum value, and these two are in between. Usually I think it makes most sense to use the 71. If you want to know how this is calculated exactly, the 3D BAG has this information online, how they calculate these values. To compute our building height, we also need another value in the list, which is the HMyFeld, which basically means the height where the building starts. And we have to calculate a new field where we subtract the myfeld height with the 70% height value. And we'll do that by clicking on this small field calculator symbol and make sure you have to create a new field option ticked. And the output field name will be building height. The output field type will be a decimal number. And the rest of the values we can leave the same. And then we have this little expression window, and you can just start typing h underscore and you already see the different values. So we're going to use the duck71 minus the h_myfeld. And then if you press OK, QGIS will make a new column here that's called building height with the values that we're interested in. Because we calculated a new field, QGIS turned on the editing mode, so we have to turn that off again and select save and close the attribute table again. What we have to do now is actually move those surfaces according to their building height so we can extrude them later on in Rhino. And we do that with a processing tool. So we have to go to processing and select the processing toolbox. And we'll get this new window. And you can search for Z value. There's this option called set value. So double click that. And for the input layer, we'll use our clipped layer of the buildings. And for the set value, we want to choose our newly created field. So we'll go to attribute field, and all the way on the bottom we have the building height, and then select run. And then you'll see that QGIS made a new layer again called Z-added that we can work with in Rhino. One last thing before we export the layers is we have to delete some of the fields in the attribute table of this new layer. So if you go to right click and open attribute table, toggle on the editing mode, and then select this option, delete field. You can just Control A, select everything except for our newly created one, the building height, and press OK. And turn off the editing mode again. The only reason we have to do this is because otherwise there's some issues with the export. So just make sure that the only column left is our newly created building height one. So then we can right click, make permanent, call this buildings set value added, and save it. For the other option to add buildings to your model, we'll download some OBJ files from the same website that we got our data. In the download section, you can choose the option pick a tile, and then look for your project location. Sometimes it's within one tile, but sometimes you will have to download several tiles. I will just show you a sample. So let's choose this tile and say confirm selection. And then you have a few different formats that you can download the tile in. And we want to download the OBJ file. So just click on this zip file, and it's going to be downloaded. You can extract that. And when you extract the file, you get 3 different OBJ files that are, just like in QGIS, the 3 different levels of detail. And you can just drag and drop this onto your Rhino canvas, and then you already have the buildings in your file. The only disadvantage is that you have to drag those onto the right location by hand, which is a bit cumbersome. And the buildings you have are meshes, so they're a bit hard to edit in Rhino. So if you want editable buildings, then you should use the QGIS method. The last thing we need to do before we can start working in Rhino is export the layers that we created. I'll show you using one example. For example, the buildings that we just made. If you right click, go to export, save features as. Make sure you have AutoCAD DXF selected for the format, and select the location, our folder for example, and let's call it buildings set value final. Save, and the projection system is still the correct one. Press OK. And we don't want to do that, so just say cancel. And it says task complete. We exported the layer and we're ready to go to Rhino.